Welcome to the Mrs. Silva Reading and Writing Show.
Have you ever just wanted to tag along with your big brother or your big sister? Or if you're the big brother or sister, have you ever just had someone that just wanted to tag along with you everywhere you go and you were kind of tired of it? That's our story from the Lemonade War. And let me tell you, this little sister likes to tag along a lot, and they don't always get along, but you know what brothers and sisters do usually get along all the time.
The Lemonade War by Jacqueline Davies. Chapter 1, Slump. Slump. It's a noun, a drop in the activity of a business or the economy. Evan lay on his back in the dark, throwing the baseball up in a straight line and catching it in his bare hands. Thwap, thwap. The ball made a satisfying sound as it slapped his palm. His legs flopped in a V, his arms stretched up to the ceiling. And the thought that if he missed, he'd probably break his nose made the game just interesting enough to keep going. On the floor above, he heard footsteps, his mother's, and then a long, loud, scraping, groaning sound. He stopped throwing the ball to listen. His mother was dragging something heavy across the kitchen floor, probably the broken air conditioner. A week ago, right at the beginning of the heat wave, the air conditioner in his mother's attic office had broken. The man from Sears had installed a brand new one, but left the old one sitting right in the middle of the floor. The Treskies had been walking around it all week. Scrape! Evan stood up. His mom was strong, but this was a two-person job. Hopefully she wouldn't ask him why he was hiding in the dark basement. And hopefully Jessie wouldn't be in the kitchen at all. He'd been avoiding her for 2 days now, and it was getting harder by the minute. The house just wasn't that big. Evan had his hand on the railing when the scraping noise stopped. He heard footsteps fading to silence. She'd given up. Probably the heat, he thought. It was that kind of weather, giving up kind of weather. He went back to lying on the floor. Thwap, thwap. Then he heard the basement door open. Pshh. Evan caught the ball and froze. Evan? Jessie's voice sounded echoey in the darkness. Evan? You down there? Evan held his breath. He lay completely still. The only thing that moved was the pins and needles prickling in his fingers. He heard the door start to close. Long breath out. But then it stopped and opened again. Footsteps on the carpeted stairs. A black outline of Jessie standing on the bottom step with daylight squirting all around her. Evan didn't move a muscle. Evan, is that you? Jessie took one short step into the basement. Is that? She inched her way toward him, then kicked him with her bare foot. Hey, watch it, would ya? Said Evan, swatting her leg. He suddenly felt stupid lying there in the dark. I thought you were a sleeping bag, she said. I couldn't see. What are you doing down here? How come the lights are off? It's too hot with the lights on, he said. He talked in a flat voice, trying to sound like the most boring person on the whole planet. If he kept it up, Jessie might just leave him alone. Mom's back in her office, said Jessie, lying down on the couch. Working, she groaned as she said the word. Evan didn't say anything. He went back to throwing the ball, straight up, straight down. Maybe silence would get Jessie to leave. He was starting to feel words piling up inside him, crowding his lungs, forcing out all the air. It was like having a chest full of bats beating their wings, fighting to get out. She tried to move the air conditioner, but it's too heavy, said Jessie. Evan tightened up his lips. Go away, he thought. Go away before I say something mean. It's gonna be hot all week, Jessie continued, in the 90s, all the way up till Labor Day. Thwap, thwap. So what do you want to do? Jessie asked. Scream, thought Evan. Jessie never got it when they were giving her the big freeze. She just went right on acting as if everything were great. It made it really hard to tell her to bug off without telling her to bug off. Whenever Evan did that, he felt bad. So what do you want to do? Jessie asked again, nudging him with her foot. It was a direct question. Evan had to answer it or explain why he wouldn't, and he couldn't get into that. It was too complicated, too hurtful. Huh? So what do you want to do? She asked for the third time. Doing it, said Evan. Nah, come on, for real. For real, he said. We could ride our bikes to the 7-Eleven, she said. No money, he said. You just got $10 from Grandma for your birthday. Spent it, said Evan. On what? Stuff, Evan said. Well, Jessie's voice dribbled down to nothing. Evan stopped throwing the ball and looked at her. What? Jessie pulled her legs tight to her chest. Nothing, she said. Right, said Evan. He knew that Jessie had money. Jessie always had money squirreled away in her lockbox. But that didn't mean she was going to share it. Evan went back to throwing the baseball. He felt a tiny flame of anger shoot up and lick his face. Thwap, thwap. We could build a fort in the woods, said Jessie. Too hot. We could play Strategio. Too boring. We could build a track and race marbles. Too stupid. A thin spider web of sweat draped itself over his forehead, spreading into his hair. With every throw, he told himself, it's not her fault. But he could feel his anger growing. He started popping his elbow to put a little more juice on the ball. It was flying a good 4 feet into the air every time, straight up, straight down. Pop, thwap, pop, thwap. The bats in his chest were going nuts. What is the matter with you? Asked Jessie. You've been so weird the last couple of days. Man, here they come. I just don't want to play a dumb game like Strategio, he said. You like Strategio. I only picked that because it's your favorite game. I was being nice, in case you hadn't noticed. Look, there are only 6 days left of summer, and I'm not going to waste them playing a dumb game. Evan felt his heartbeat speed up. Part of him wanted to stuff a sock in his mouth, and part of him wanted to deck his sister. It's a stupid game, and it's for babies, and I don't want to play a stupid baby game. Pop, thwap, pop, thwap. Why are you being so mean? Evan knew he was being mean, and he hated being mean, especially to her, but he couldn't help it. He was so angry and so humiliated and so full of bats. There was nothing else he could be except alone. And she'd taken even that away from him. You're the genius, he said. You figure it out. Good. That would shut her up, for once. Evan watched the ball fly in the air. Is this because of the letter? Jessie asked. Crack. Evan had taken his eyes off the ball for 1 second. Just for 1 second, and the ball came crashing down on his nose. Crud, oh crud! He curled over onto his side, grabbing his nose with both hands. There was a blinding, blooming pain right behind his eyes that was quickly spreading to the outer edges of his skull. Do you want some ice? He heard Jessie ask in a calm voice. What do you think? He shouted. Yeah? She stood up. No, I don't want any stupid ice. The pain was starting to go away, like a humongous wave that crashes with a lot of noise and spray, but then slowly fizzles away into nothing. Evan rolled to a sitting position and took his hands away from his nose. With his thumb and index finger, he started to pinch the bridge. Was it still in a straight line? Jessie peered at his face in the dim light. You're not bleeding, she said. Yeah, well, it hurts, he said, a lot. It's not broken, she said. You don't know that, he said. You don't know everything you know. You think you do, but you don't. It's not even swollen. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Evan held his nose with one hand and hit his sister's knee with the other. Then he picked up the baseball and struggled to his feet. Leave me alone. I came down here to get away from you, and you just had to follow. You ruined everything. You ruined my summer, and now you're going to ruin school. I hate you. When he got to the bottom of the steps, he threw the baseball down in disgust. Thud. Chapter 2, Breakup. Breakup is a dissolution of a unit, an organization, or a group of organizations. The Justice Department sometimes forces the breakup of a large corporation into several smaller companies. Jessie didn't get it. She just didn't get it. What was Evan's problem? He'd been acting like a weirdo for 2 days, and it was 2 days ago that the letter had arrived. But why would he be so upset about that letter? This is a puzzle, Jessie told herself. And I'm good at puzzles. But it was a puzzle about feelings, and Jessie knew that feelings were her weakest subject. Jessie sat in the cool darkness of the basement and thought back to Monday, the day the letter had come. Everything had been normal. She and Evan were putting together a lemonade stand in the driveway when the mailman walked up and handed Jessie a bundle of letters. Evan never bothered to look at the mail, but Jessie was always entering contests and expecting to win, so she flipped through the letters right away. Boring, 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 said Jessie as each letter flashed by. Hey, something from school, addressed to Mom. She held up a plain white envelope. What do you think it is? Dunno, said Evan. He was in the garage uncovering the small wooden table they usually used for a stand. It was buried under 2 snow tubes, 2 boogie boards, and the garden hose. Jessie watched while Evan gave a mighty pull and lifted the table up over his head. Wow, he's gotten so big, thought Jessie, remembering what Mom had said about Evan's growth spurt. Sometimes Jessie felt like Evan was growing twice as fast as she was, growing up, growing away. It looks important, said Jessie. It looks like bad news, is what she thought in her head. Was there a problem, a complaint, a mix-up? All the nervousness she'd been feeling about skipping to the 4th grade suddenly burbled up inside of her. This table's really dirty, said Evan. Do you think we can just cover it with a lot of cups and the pitcher and no one will notice? Jessie looked. The table was streaked with black. No, Evan groaned. I'll clean it, said Jessie. Evan had only agreed to have a lemonade stand because it was one of her favorite things to do. The least she could do for him was clean the gunk off the table. Maybe, she said, holding up the envelope again, they're postponing school. Maybe the first day isn't going to be next Tuesday. You think? That got Evan's attention. Let's ask Mom to open it, he said. Up in the humming cool of her office, Mrs. Tresky read the letter through once. Well, she said, this is a curveball. She looked right at Evan. Jessie thought her face looked worried. Evan, you and Jessie are going to be in the same class this year. You'll both have Mrs. Overton. Jessie felt relief flood her entire body. The same class. If she could have wished for one thing in the whole world, that's what she would have wished for. She would be with Evan, and Evan would make everything easier. He would introduce her to all those 4th graders. He would show them all that she was okay. Not some puny 2nd grader who didn't really belong. But Evan didn't look happy. He looked angry. Why? He asked in an almost shouting voice. Mrs. Tresky scanned the letter. Well, the classes were small to start with, and now some of the 4th graders they thought would be attending aren't because they're moving or switching to private schools. So they need to combine the 2 small classes into one bigger class. That is so unfair, said Evan. I wanted Mrs. Scobie, and I don't want... He looked at Jessie. That is so unfair. Jessie was surprised. This was great news. Why didn't Evan see that? They always had fun together at home. Now they could have fun in school too. It'll be fun, she said to Evan. It will not be fun, said Evan. School isn't fun. And then he stomped downstairs and locked himself in his room for the rest of the afternoon. They never finished the lemonade stand. And here it was, 2 days later, and Evan was still all locked up. Even though he wasn't in his room, he wouldn't talk to her, and he wouldn't play with her. So Jessie went up to her room and did what she always did when she was upset or angry or sad or confused. She started reading Charlotte's Web. She had read the book about 100 times. She was at a good part, the happy part. Wilbur had just been named some pig, and he was getting all kinds of attention from the Zuckermans and the whole town. But Jessie couldn't settle into that happy feeling, the one that always came when Charlotte said, "I dare say my trick will work, and Wilbur's life can be saved." Instead, she kept noticing an unhappy feeling, tap, tap, tapping on her shoulder. And it wasn't the unhappy feeling that came from knowing that Charlotte was going to die on page 171. It was Evan. She couldn't remember thinking about what he had said. She couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Jessie could only remember the one other time that Evan had said, "I hate you," to her. Grandma had been over and Evan needed help with his math homework. He had that frustrated, screwed up mouth look that he always got with math or spelling or writing reports. Mom called it his "he's gonna blow" look. But Grandma couldn't help him because it was all Greek to her. So Jessie had shown him how to do each problem. Well, she just sort of jumped in and done the problems for him. That was helping, wasn't it? Grandma had called her a girl genius, but Evan had ripped the paper in half and run upstairs shouting, "I hate you," just before slamming his door. That was last year. Jessie rested the book on her stomach and stared at the ceiling. People were confused. She'd rather do 100 math problems than try to figure out someone else's mixed up feelings any day of the week. That's why she and Evan got along so well. He'd just tell her straight out, "I'm mad at you because you ate the last Rice Krispies treat." And then she could say, "Sorry. Hey, I've got some Starbursts in my room. You want them?" And that would be that. Evan was a straight shooter. Not like the girls at school, the ones who had started that club. She rolled over onto her side to get away from those thoughts. Across the room, against the opposite wall, she noticed the 3 pieces of foam core her mom had bought for Jessie's Labor Day project. Every year, the Rotary Club sponsored a competition for kids to see who could come up with the best display related to the holiday. This was the first year Jessie was old enough to participate, and she had begged her mom to buy foam core and gel pens and fluorescent paper and special stickers for her display. She was determined to win the prize money. $100, but she hadn't been able to come up with a single idea that seemed good enough. So here it was, just 5 days before the competition, and the foam core was still completely blank. Jessie reached for her book. She didn't want to think about the girls at school, and she didn't want to think about the competition. She started reading again. Wilbur and Charlotte were at the fair, and Charlotte was beginning to show her age. Jessie read the words that Wilbur said to his best friend. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better." Well, the second part didn't apply at all, but Jessie imagined herself saying the first line. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Evan." It sounded about right. At least it would show him that she cared. And Jessie knew that this was important. When someone was feeling upset, she decided to go downstairs and give it a try. She would do just about anything to get Evan back to the way he was before the letter. Jessie looked in the kitchen in the backyard. No Evan. He was halfway down the steps. She was halfway down the steps to the basement when she heard a noise coming from the garage. She opened the door and felt the full heat of the day on her skin. It was like some giant had blown his hot, stinky breath on her. In the garage, she found Evan and Scott Spencer. Weird, she thought. Evan doesn't even like Scott Spencer. They'd been on-again, off-again friends from kindergarten. But ever since Scott had purposely put Evan's bike helmet under the wheel of the Tresicks minivan so that Mrs. Tresky ran over it when she backed out, the friendship had definitely been off. Jessie looked from Evan to Scott and back again. Now she had no idea what to say. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Evan." Didn't seem to make much sense when Evan was obviously having fun with his friend. She tried to think of something else to say. All she could come up with was, "What are you doing?" The boys were bent over a piece of cardboard. Evan was writing letters with a skinny red felt-tipped pen. The purple cooler was in the middle of the garage, and 2 plastic chairs were stacked on top of it. On the top of the chair was a brown paper bag. Nothing, said Evan, not looking up. Jessie walked over to the boys and peered over Evan's shoulder. Lemonade, 50 cents. She said, "You spelled lemonade wrong. It's an O, not an I." But she thought, "Oh, good, a lemonade stand, my favorite thing to do." The boys didn't say anything. Jessie saw Evan's mouth tighten up. "You want me to make the lemonade?" she asked. "Already made," said Evan. "I could decorate the sign," she said. "I'm good at drawing butterflies and flowers and things." Scott snorted. "Huh, we don't want girl stuff like that on our sign." "Do you want to use my lockbox to keep the money in? It's got a tray with separate compartments for all the different coins." "Nope," said Evan, still working on the sign. "Well," she said, looking around, "I can clean the table for you." The small wooden table, still covered in black streaks, was pushed up against the bikes. "We're not using it," said Evan. "But we always use the table for a stand," said Jessie. Evan pushed his face in her direction. "We don't want it." Jessie took a couple of steps back. Her insides felt runny, like a fried egg that hasn't cooked enough. She knew she should just go back into the house, but for some reason her legs wouldn't move. She stood still, her bare feet rooted to the cool cement. Scott whispered something to Evan, and the 2 boys laughed, low and mean. Jessie swayed toward the door, but her feet stayed planted. She couldn't stand it that Evan wanted to be with Scott, who was a real jerk, more than her. "Don't need it," said Evan. "Yeah, you do," insisted Jessie. "You always need change, especially in the beginning. You'll lose sales if you can't make change." Evan capped the pen with a loud snap and stuck it in his pocket. "Scott's bankrolling us. His mom keeps a change jar, so we've got plenty." The boy stood up. Evan held the sign for Scott to read, turning his back on Jessie. "Awesome," said Scott. Jessie knew the sign was not awesome. The letters were too small and thin to read from a distance. Evan should have used a fat marker instead of a skinny felt-tipped pen. Everybody knew that. There weren't any pretty decorations to attract customers, and the word lemonade was spelled wrong. Why wouldn't Evan take a little help from her? She just wanted to help. Scott turned to her and said, "Are you really going to be in 4th grade this year?" Jessie's back stiffened. "Yep," she said. "Wow, that is so freaky." "Is not," she said, sticking her chin out. "Is too," said Scott. "I mean, you're a 2nd grader, and now you're going to be a 4th grader? That's just messed up." Jessie looked at Evan, but he was busy taping the sign to the cooler. "Lots of people skip grades," said Jessie. "It's not that big a deal." "It's completely weird," said Scott. "I mean, you miss everything from a whole year. You miss the whole unit on Antarctica, and that was the best. And the field trip to the aquarium, and the thing where we sent the letters all over the country. Remember that, Evan? You got that letter from Alaska? That was so cool." Evan nodded, but he didn't look up. "It's not that big of a deal," said Jessie again, her voice stretched tight like a rubber band. "It's like you miss a year of your life," Scott said. "It's like you're going to die a whole year earlier than the rest of us because you never had 3rd grade. Jessie felt cold and hot at the same time. Part of her wanted to yell, "That doesn't make any sense!" But the other part of her felt so freakish, like Scott had just noticed she had 3 legs. Evan stood up and tossed the paper bag to Scott. Then he grabbed the plastic chair with one hand. "Come on, let's go." He reached down to grab one handle of the cooler. Scott grabbed the other, and together they lifted it and began to walk out of the garage. "Hey, Evan," said Jessie, calling to their backs. "Can I come too?" "No," he said, without turning around. "Come on, please. I'll be a big help. I can do lots of things." "You're too young," he said sharply. "You're just a baby." The boys walked out. "You're just a baby." Jessie couldn't believe Evan had said that. After all the stuff they'd done together, and he was only 14 months older than she was, hardly even a full year. She was about to yell back something really harsh, something stinging and full of bite, like, "Oh yeah?" when she heard Scott say to Evan, "Man, I can't believe you have to be in the same class as your little sister. If that happened to me, I'd move to South America." "Yeah, tell me about it," replied Evan, crossing the street. The words died on Jessie's lips. She watched Evan walking away, getting smaller and smaller. He was deserting her. He wasn't going to stand by her at school. He wasn't going to smooth the way for her. He was going to be on the other side with all of them, looking down on her, telling everyone that she was too young to be part of the crowd, telling everyone that she didn't belong. "Fine for you, Evan Tresky," she said as she marched into the house, her fists balled up at her sides. "I don't need you. I don't need you to have fun. I don't need you to run a lemonade stand, and I don't need you to make friends in the 4th grade." Halfway up the stairs, she stopped and shouted, "And I am not a baby." So we just started the Lemonade War, and you just finished reading chapters 1 and 2, and you can already tell it's going to be a brother versus sister battle. I mean, the Lemonade War itself kind of gives that away, doesn't it? Have you guys ever had a younger sibling or a younger cousin or even just a younger friend that always wants to tag along and do everything that you do? That's kind of how Jessie is here with her brother a little bit, and her brother's getting frustrated, and you saw some of the reasons already why he's getting frustrated too, and I'm sure you've been frustrated with your sibling as well. So let's talk a little bit about Jessie and about her brother Evan. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a compare and contrast map. And so this is comparing and contrasting, and we're going to use this organizer below to compare Evan and Jessie. And we're going to kind of talk about how they're different and how they're similar to one another. And you might even find some ways that you and your sibling or friend or cousin is also you're different, but you're also similar in certain ways. So thinking about Evan, what are some things that we could say, okay, this is most definitely kind of like Evan? Okay, he, first of all, seems very angry right now, right? He's angry. And what? He doesn't seem to like what? He doesn't seem to like Jessie. Jessie tagging along, but he especially does not seem to like Jessie going into the 4th grade, right? And also another thing about Evan is he is older, right? He's the older sibling. So just thinking on your own, what are some other things that you notice about about Evan, I apologize. Now with Jessie, what are some things that you notice about her? She wants to hang out with Evan, doesn't she? She just looks up to him. She's younger. She is very smart. She's super smart, especially in math. And it sounds to me like she's kind as well, right? At least right now. It sounds like Evan is kind too, and she really looks up to her older brother, but he's not showing that kindness right now. Now remember, as we talked about with reading and tone of voice, that we can have a shift of tone. So let's see if Evan shifts at all, his tone of being angry and frustrated and things like that. And frustrated is another good one for him. As we think about like what he is at the beginning of the book, let's kind of see by the end of the book in a few weeks what he's going to be like. So let's see if we see a tone shift. And then let's also watch Jessie and see if we see any kind of tone shift with her, because right now she is kind and wants to hang out with Evan. She's younger, but she also may be a little immature. So let's see if there's any maturity or any growth in her character as well. So a few things about Evan and Jessie that are the same. They both want to do a lemonade stand, right? They obviously want to make money. even though they might have different reasons for wanting to do the lemonade stand. They are family. It sounds to me like a lot of the time before they've gotten along very well. And it also seems like even though they're not getting along right now, they still love one another, don't you think? Because they seem to still care about one another. And we can see that by, well, obviously Jesse just wanting Evan to be there. But then not only that, Evan kind of comes and checks on Jesse, and he remembers the times that they've had a really good time, and he remembers that they love each other. So that's whenever we compare and contrast the two. You see Evan and you see Jesse, and you see the ways that they are similar to one another. And we'll find more of those ways as we go throughout our book. So let's take a look now at what you're going to do. It is your turn now. So enjoy a glass of lemonade if you have it. Go make yourself one, because that sounds really good with all these hot days we've been having. And you're going to complete chapters 1 and 2 questions on Schoology. They're both on Schoology for chapters 1 and 2, and they are together on Schoology. So just go and click on that on Schoology, and you should be able to go right to it. If you need to go back to the video reading, go back. I know it was long and you may have had to pause it and kind of go back to it, things like that, that's fine. But if you need to go back to the reading, it works the same as if you had the book in your hands. Go back to your reading. Double check your answers. With your chapters 1 through 2 questions on Schoology, you can stop and go back. I've made it so that it is resumable. So if you start it one day, you want to finish it the next day, that's fine. Give it your best shot, all right? Give it your absolute best shot. It may not be perfect, but we're going to try it. Okay, so now it is your turn, guys. Good luck. And if you have any questions, let Mrs. Silva know.
Thank you for joining us for the Mrs. Silva Reading and Writing Show. We'll see you again later.